2, 1.
Good afternoon. Hi, my name's John McNeill. I work for Cambridge University Press. I'm sitting talking to you from my living room, and I just heard my front door move, so I hope no one comes in to disturb us. I've worked for the press for a little bit of time, for about 12 years, and before that I was a teacher for about 10 years. So I've got a little bit of experience of teaching, but I have to admit a lot of it is in the past. It was quite varied. I taught adults, teens, and younger learners. Younger learners was the group of students that I learned to teach towards the end of my teaching career, and I found it the most challenging, but I think I kind of got it towards the end. So we're going to go through a talk on listening today. It was originally put together by a colleague in Italy called Fabio Galvanini. So I hope I do it some justice, and I hope you get some benefit from it. So the topic of listening is quite a wide topic. It's mixed in with almost every other skill, and it can be a little bit of a challenge. And I'll maybe recount some stories of how it certainly challenged me in my early days of teaching. So I think before we start, I'll give you a little bit of an outline of what we're going to do. He said as he attempted to, here we go. So today we will we'll actually look for some sort of a shared definition of what listening is and how it happens. And we're definitely going to look at lots of activities for planning listening. We're going to maybe focus more on what we do before a listening exercise than actually during a listening exercise. And we're going to demonstrate some activities together, and I hope we'll show you how they can be as much fun as possible. At the end, we'll draw some conclusions. So far, you've been listening to me for a few minutes, and I've told you my name. I've told you I'm in my living room. I'm sitting in a country that I wasn't born in. I live in Switzerland. I've been here for a little bit of time, maybe 15 years. And I don't know if you can guess my accent. But if you think you can guess my accent, please pop it into the chat box. So that's one question I have for you, and I'm going to answer that question. Scottish. Oh, lovely. Good guess. British, that's a political question. That's a hard one. British would cover me. But no fully correct answer yet about my accent. So I'm going to give you some clues. I have a second question, and the second question. Somebody's getting warm. I have a second question, which is about the number of sounds in the English language. How many phonemes does the English language have? And I'm going to give you the answer to that question at the somebody thinks I'm Welsh, at the end of the event. But first, I'm going to give you some clues as to what my accent might be. I'm going to show you a first image of my village of where I grew up. So this is the village that I grew up in. I didn't grow up in this house, but this is a part of the village. And I'm not much of a gardener, but is that an English rose? Is that what I'm trying to show you there in the front of the image? The design of the building is a building you would typically find in Cornwall. So I actually grew up in a Cornish village. Cornwall is in the west of England, but the Cornish village I grew up in isn't in England. It was built to keep someone from feeling homesick. So here's a wider shot of the village I grew up in. And as you can see, I grew up in an area right beside the coast, beside the sea. And yes, the first image is of a Cornish building. The image on the bottom left is a little bit more green. So this is the exact village I grew up in. The little house at the bottom was my grandfather's house, the very bottom white image at the start of the beach. But until about 100 years ago, the people who lived in my village found it very difficult to go shopping because there were these hills up behind them, and it was very difficult to walk along the coast. So they actually went shopping by boat, and if they wanted to buy or sell sheep or cows or to trade, they would sail in their boat. And that brings me to my next clue. So I don't know if you know, does anybody know the name of this animal, this mythical creature? Yep, it's the Loch Ness Monster, or is it the Loch Ness Monster? I see we've got a few different spellings there. Nessie, yes, this is Nessie. Nessie is the Loch Ness Monster, or some people might say the Loch Ness Monster. And the region I'm from is in Northern Ireland. So the first guess that said British is politically correct. And I'm from the very top corner of Ireland, which is only 20 kilometers away from Scotland. So because of the geography of this little corner of Ireland, a lot of people speak with a slightly Scottish accent. So yeah, I'm from Northern Ireland. I grew up in a Cornish village, which is an English village, but it was in Northern Ireland. And traditionally, the people of the area that I live in have a slightly Scottish accent, even though we've lived there for hundreds of years. So anyway, the R, yes, somebody's mentioning my R. That's, I don't know if it's the R I pronounce. I think that's what you mean, yeah. The village, oh, I'll need to get my payment from the tourist board if I name the village. It's called Cushendun, and if any of you are fans of the Game of Thrones, quite a bit of Game of Thrones was filmed within a few kilometers of this village, particularly the caves that you see there at the end of the bay, and other scenes where the anyway. Well, sorry, I'm not here to talk about Game of Thrones, but yeah, a lot of the area was a lot of it was filmed there. So good. We've established that you can listen to me. You've established that my accent is understandable, and it's I didn't hide my accent. I speak the way I've always spoken, and yeah, I'm Irish. Okay, moving on now. So I have some questions that I'd like to ask you, and these questions are like, what is listening, and how does it happen? So any ideas to these questions? Ideally, these three questions I would have you answer together in pairs, and then we would in plenary go through some answers. But unfortunately, that's not really possible today. So what I'd like you to do is to maybe think about these things. What actually is listening? And yes, Galina is saying it's what we hear. It's what comes through our ears. And when do we start listening? Why is it important? And what are the challenges? So unfortunately, we can't actually discuss these in a plenary situation. So I'm going to give some input to these questions and some answers, and let's see what we can come up to have a shared understanding. So the first question of what is listening. So I think one of the first things to say, it's the main way that that students get their information, and not even students. It's the main way that that every human being gets its first information. So I'm thinking back to my eldest child. I have a 6-year-old and a 5-year-old, two little girls. And when my 6-year-old and the 5-year-old, when they were still inside in the oven, when they were still inside the womb, at bedtime we played them these little teddy bears. So my eldest daughter had a little caterpillar, and she had it would play a little song, and we would do that at bedtime. And I suppose this is an example of one-way listening. We were giving a message. The message was bedtime, time to sleep. And then when our daughter was born, we would still use the same little teddy bear at bedtime. It was a little drawstring caterpillar, and it would play a little tune. And so this was listening that my daughter understood. That would mean it's time to sleep. And she learned that sort of one-way listening even from before she was born. So that's one of the things that listening is. It's an absolutely natural, innate skill that we have. And it's something that we're born with, and it's how we all get to know the sounds of language. If we could read English, we wouldn't really get to know the sounds of English very, very well alone. Some of the examples words I've already used, like Loch Ness or Loch Ness, these are not very clear when you look at them written. But it's how students get to understand the sounds of English. So, and of course, yes, as some of you have already put in the chat box, listening's everywhere. It doesn't need to be conversation. It can be songs, stories, teachers talk, and working with their partners and their peers in a classroom. But now I'm going to ask a question. Do we always have to listen to listen? So we're going to do some silent listening. And I'm not sure if you've done silent listening before, but I'll show you how it works. Silent listening is, first of all, I'm going to pre-teach some vocabulary. So if you can tell me what you see and maybe put it into the chat box. So what am I showing you now? It's food and it's salad, yeah. What have we got here? Porridge, no, I was a bit confused at first. It's meatballs, yeah, correct, meatballs. I thought maybe it was falafel, but I think it's meatballs. And an easier one. We've got a lovely big banana. And the last one, water. So here are some vocabulary. Depending on the level of your students, we've pre-taught the vocabulary. Now I'm going to keep my video on, and I'm going to say some of these words, and you're going to put the word that I say into the chat box. Yep, that's correct. It's banana. I'll try one more. Right. So yeah, we've done some silent listening, and what we're really doing is we're teaching the students how to listen. So this is an activity where the student is really focusing on the physical mechanics of speaking, of seeing the sound, reading lips, and seeing how the face moves. And this is an activity that you could also set then in pairs of students. But if you do it in pairs of students, you'll need to make very sure that you have drilled the pronunciation, because if the students are mispronouncing the word, then they will not be able to mime the word and say the word silently. It's also an activity that you could just do this at a drop of a hat at any time. Perhaps you could use it as a classroom management strategy. If noise levels are getting a little high, you could maybe bring it down. So this will bring the noise level down very, very quickly, yeah, especially for young learners. And you could also adapt the activity to any level of student. So unfortunately, I can't do that in pairs, but if you were to do it in a wider group, you could have a larger collection of flashcards to do it. So now I'm going to look at our second question. So why is listening important? So we've already covered it. It's the main source of information. It's how we get to know the sound of a language. But I'd like to talk a little bit more about that and talk about some words that maybe adults mispronounce. I know some adults with a very high level of English, and they might mispronounce the past tense. They might pronounce ed. They might say wanted, and they might put that ed pronunciation where it's not needed. if you look at a word like the word knee, Knee, or the word no, or the word king, and then we've got lots of words which may sound the same but use different letters. So the grapheme morpheme sort of they're not well coordinated in a language like English. I'm sitting here in a German-speaking country, albeit a Swiss German-speaking part of the country, and there's a pretty solid relationship between letters and sounds in the German language, but that isn't so in English. This isn't such a problem for younger learners. Younger learners are not so very phased by that. And they have the ability just to take sounds and to accept them with a high level of accuracy. And younger learners are really able to do this. I think the truth is we don't really fully understand why this is. It's about our inert ability to learn language, and that ability to learn language is stronger when we're younger, and it stays quite strong. And as we get older, and I'm approaching the half century part, I find it a little harder to learn new parts of the few languages that I have some skill in. So this is why one of the reasons that listening is so very, very important. That it helps the students get to know the sound and the pronunciation without having without questioning it the way an adult might question. So what are the challenges? What challenges would you have when you teach young learners? Some ideas in the chat box, please. They don't actually listen. Okay, that is true. I was accused of not listening a lot at school. In fact, I had a teacher I don't think of in a positive way, who used to say that I had 2 ears and 1 mouth, and I should listen twice as much as I spoke. They speak quickly. Yeah. They get bored. Well, this is true. Keeping their attention. Yeah. These are lots and lots of challenges. I'm going to tell you some of the challenges I had when I started teaching. I started teaching in 1999 in Poland, and most of my students then were young adults, so there might have been 16 to 19, and I was using adult course books. And I probably did the best that I could with my limited knowledge at the time. I probably thought about pre-listening exercises. I probably thought about prediction. I would have taught in advance the most obviously difficult pieces of vocabulary. So I did the things that I tried to do. But when I think back about those times, a lot of listening that I did, I fell into the trap of just testing and practicing listening. It was a case of hitting play on the cassette tape. Now, I don't know if you're still teaching with cassette tapes, but that's how I started teaching. And I certainly can remember I've spent many large sections of time in my life fast forwarding and rewinding up a cassette tape to find the correct unit. But I will admit that in my teaching, one of the biggest challenges was I just did listening rather than teaching the student how to listen. So I'm going to play a little bit of a listening now. I'd like to ask you, are we practicing how to listen? Or are we just testing listening? What are we doing here?
What food would Dan like?
Would you like a banana, Dan? Yes, please. And can I have some grapes? Okay. And would you like a kiwi too? It's your favourite. No thanks, Mum. I don't want one today.
Yeah, I have to admit, I was I had to wait till the end until I figured out what Dan really wanted. So I suppose the question is, what were we doing here? Were we teaching the students how to listen? I don't think we were really teaching a great deal. We were only testing. We didn't give any instructions. We didn't create expectations. Very good, Vera. We were testing listening. Correct. It's an extreme example. We wouldn't just throw a listening exercise at students like that. We can't be surprised if they are not very motivated by an exercise like that. It's just completely out of the blue. We'll come back to this a little bit later, and we'll have another example. And indeed, you're correct. We'll do some preparation around the listening exercise. So the challenges are that, in my experience and my early teaching, I maybe didn't teach how to listen. I just practiced it rather than teaching it. A listening like that, which is just out of the blue, press play, could be, quite stressful for a student. It certainly wouldn't have really got their interest. So I don't think we really helped with their motivation there. So what things would we really need to consider when we do a listening exercise? So I'm going to go through 5 things. We need the children to learn. We need them to be enthusiastic and to perform at their best. So we really do have to motivate them. And I'll go through some activities that might help with this later. We need to use language that's appropriate for the student. Now, this does not mean that we have to go through the English profile and check the A1 or A2, the exact CEFR level of every item of vocabulary. But, the general topic and the vocabulary needs to be at their level. We can actually go above the level with chunks of grammar, as long as we do it in quite a controlled way. So we need to make sure that we structure activities and that we give them pre-activities and lots of support and scaffolding, and have a real purpose and a real goal in mind. And that way we will have very focused students. We also get their input into what they do and make it personal. And we know this from all aspects of our life. When we have personal stake in something, we're much more motivated. And that helps us ultimately to come up with better results. So if we were in a classroom in a listening exercise now, we would set the scene. We would give a practical purpose for what we want to do. And the practical purpose that we have is we're going to make a restaurant. We're going to have real cooks, real waiters, and we're going to have the food that you like. I like food. Food's motivating, and I think it's something that's very familiar to students. So I think this is a good opener for students, and to give them a practical purpose before a listening. So we do it very, very gradually, and we do it with scaffolding. And one of the best ways to introduce vocabulary, it was up earlier in the chat box, but I can't see the full chat box now. But some ideas, what are the best ways of introducing vocabulary? Pictures are really good. Flashcards, yeah. And to elicit the meaning, yeah. I remember in my CELTA course, I was always told that it was important to have the student thinking about the meaning, and then to get them to pronounce the word before they saw the form of the word. So this is another reason why, more so with older students, but when they see the form of a word, it can hold them back from pronouncing. We've got sounds and photos and context, so I think we would put those 3 things together. And songs are really a great way. Songs and chanting. I'm going to play 20 seconds of such a song now.
Do you like fruits?
Yes, I do.
Do you like juice?
No, I don't.
juice? Yes, I do. Do you like juice? No, I don't. I like apples. I like oranges. I like grapes, but I don't like juice. I like apples. I like oranges.
Okay.
I like grapes.
That's halfway through. I think we'll stop it there. Apologies to fans both of Mozart and Meatloaf. But yes, as Danny is telling us, it's a nice and easy song. And song, especially if you could support it with pictures and visuals, is a very, very good way of helping students memorize. I learnt songs and prayers in Gaelic when I was a child. And sometimes I hear these songs and I can recount them and say them, and my pronunciation probably is pretty good, but I honestly couldn't really say what they mean. So yeah, flashcards, images backed up by sound and songs. This is a great way to absorb new vocabulary. I've mentioned my young children before. I've got a 6-year-old and a 5-year-old. I live in a country with a lot of immigration. At least half of the other school children in the kindergarten where my children go, at least half of them have other languages at home. And I don't mean other Swiss languages. They have other languages at home. So my children learn how to say Happy Christmas, how to say Happy Birthday, how to sing songs from all these different countries and different language groups. And it's completely natural, and they do it, and they don't question the pronunciation. And so song really is a way to learn the sounds of a language and to remember the sound of a language. And it happens really quite painlessly, and it really is fun for students. So now that we've sort of pre-taught the vocabulary through songs and maybe chanting, excuse me. We now maybe need to consolidate a little bit more. Somebody's starting to dance. Yes, movements. If you could put movement in there too, that could definitely really add to it. Another activity now to consolidate might be by playing a guessing game. Yeah, total physical response we've got from Svet. Head, shoulders, knees and toes. Yes, you're bringing me back to my memories of I'm a Little Teapot and the things I learned as a child, which I still remember. So a consolidation game, we could play a guessing game. So I'm going to give you some hints on an item of vocabulary that we maybe have seen, and you can tell me what you think it is. So the first tip, it's liquid, you drink it. I'm distracting you with my glass. It's made of fruit. The first letter is J. Yay! So we've got 15, 20 J's floating down the screen. So this is a guessing game. This game could work at a distance too. This presentation was put together before the current situation that we're in, where I'm sure some of you are trying to teach remotely at a distance. So this is an activity that could work at a distance as well. Yes, juice is what we're looking for. You could then add a little bit of emphasis, a little bit more stress on certain words in the guessing game so that you don't overload the students. You could say it's liquid, you drink it, it's made of fruit, the first letter is J. Also good just to practice the sounds of the alphabet if you've got a varied enough lexical set. So you could do this in pairs. Your pairs could have a lexical set, and they could play the guessing games together. Then they could swap roles and carry on. So we've done quite a bit of scaffolding so far, and now we're ready to move on to the restaurant game. So are you all ready to play the restaurant game? This is my question. Good. So you'll remember one of the tips that we've already discussed was that we had to personalize activities. So the next few activities and the pre-teaching of vocabulary, it may not be realistic that this would all happen in one unit of a lesson. It's maybe a series of activities that could be refreshing, could be taught in one lesson, refreshed in the next, but you would all bring it in together to the restaurant. That would bring everything together, perhaps in a different lesson. So one of the tips we had was to personalize it, to make it relevant to the students. So to do this, you could ask the children in your class what food they like and ask them to draw a picture of that. And if they draw a picture on maybe bits of cardboard or folded pieces of paper, they are really in effect making flashcards. So they're building up the lexical set and they're adding their own personal input into it. You might get lots of chocolate. So it could be something where you have to maybe introduce some vegetables if their lexical set is just chips and chocolate. So you build up the lexical set, personalizing it by getting that input from the students. You put them into groups, so groups of say between 4 or 6, depending on the size of your class. And then you ask them sort of collaborate together to maybe think of the name of the restaurant and to write a menu. Now, this is where some scaffolding will really come in. You can easily find little menus like this online. You could give this to each group. You've got some visual prompts there. You also, they don't have to do the layout of the menu. They simply have to write in based upon the vocabulary that you have been covering. Could be burgers, chips, sausages, whatever they have. So when the menu is complete, then the students come to you, the teacher, and you're now the greengrocer or the butcher or the supermarket, and they need to buy the items that they need for their restaurant. So this is a way for you to consolidate that language, make sure they can pronounce the language, and you maybe want to structure this and put some of the key language that they will use when they come to get their ingredients, maybe put it on the board. So here you have a little bit of flexibility, but let's say, do you have? Yes, I do. No, I don't. So do you have bananas? Yes, I do. Here you are. And they build up the food items that they want for their menu, for their restaurant. If they're not asking for food items, you could maybe offer to support them and say, would you like? And this would then, you're delivering another chunk. So would you like apples? And they could say, yes, yes. Yes, please, or no, thanks. So by doing this, you, from your shop, sell the food items to the students. Now we're talking about using chunks. So the next activity, and I'm looking at the time and I'm conscious of speed, and I guess because we're not sitting in a real room, and I'm getting lots of feedback on the chat here, but we don't really have that time for interaction and talking together, that my speed might be a little bit faster than I really would have hoped for. It's 5 minutes past the hour. But speed can be used in a much more useful way with drilling. So we're going to look at some speed drilling. So this is a way where we can teach chunks of language to students. So we'll stick with do you have. So I would ask the students to repeat after me at the same speed. So I would say, do you have? And I would build it up from maybe a slow speed to a natural speed, like, do you have? And then I might increase the speed to maybe the sort of speed that we wouldn't normally use in a classroom. Do you have? Do you have? And then as we go, we could take it into a farcical end where it just becomes jiav. It has no meaning. But what we are doing here is we're sort of showing the student how do you have can become do you have, and it can become different. And the younger student will just accept this. They won't question it. Some other things that you're doing with speed drilling, you're actually, if you keep going until the drill is just a bit of a mess, you're giving the student the ability to understand the item, and they can understand it even at speed. Don't know. Oh, somebody's in. I don't know. Yes, this is a good example. I'll share to Daniela. I'll share something. My children say "gonna," and I was horrified when I started hearing my children saying "I wanna" and "I gonna," because I don't say that, nor does my wife. And then my children watch very little screen time, maybe a maximum of 1.5 or 2 hours in a week that they would have access to a screen. But one of the things they watch is a cartoon show on, I'm not sure which streaming service it is, maybe Amazon. And it's a show called Stinky and Dirty. And they say, I'm gonna, I wanna. Yeah, so my students have this more modern, a younger version of speech, and I was quite confused for a long time where they got it until I realized they got it from a cartoon called Stinky and Dirty. So during speed drilling, you're giving good practice to the student. You're building their confidence that they can still understand something even when it's very, very fast. And you're giving them non-threatening speaking and listening practice. You could build this up in another way with board work. And I'm thinking now of not my first director of studies, but maybe year 3 of teaching. I learned this board work from my director of studies at the time, and he would build up the key parts of a drill on the board. So, do you have? Yes, I do. No, I don't. He would put "do you have" on the left-hand side of the board. Then the prompts, yes, I do, no, I don't. He might use the question mark for "do you have," and a plus sign and a negative sign for the 2 answers. Then he would, maybe in the middle, he would put the items, do you have bananas? Do you have apples? Do you have whatever? Then he would build the drill up, and he would change the speed with his finger. His finger would indicate how quickly you do the speed drilling. And then in the end, he wouldn't drill. He would just run the drill with the students with his finger pointing it at the actual items. And then he would slowly maybe rub out some of the items. And in the end, occasionally, you could maybe do the drill on the board with actually no items on the board. So like, do you have bananas? And then you would go back to where the word bananas was placed. So that's something I've certainly done with adults and with teens. I can't say that I've had the opportunity to do that with very young learners, but speed drilling is an awful lot of fun, and it could get noisy. So maybe after a quite intense period of speed drilling, if the students are doing it with each other, then perhaps it would be good to do some silent listening after that to calm them down. Okay, so that was just a little overview of some ways to drill chunking of language and especially grammar. So I'm going to ask some more questions for the chat box. So we've pre-taught and we've consolidated the vocabulary, and we've drilled it, and we have the idea of the restaurant. And now we need to have some people. What people do we need in a restaurant? What groups of people might we have? Some ideas into the chat box, please. Yep, we will definitely need a waiter. Yep. Customers, cook. Yep. So we definitely will need cook, and we'll definitely need a waiter, and we'll definitely need customers. And we'll need to think about you will know this, you will know your students, and you will know maybe you need 2 chefs, a manager. I didn't think of a manager here. We're not going to have any complaints. So we're just going to have the chef and the waiter and the customer. But you might decide that you want to put 2 chefs together, or the waiter might want to have an assistant waiter with him, or 2 waiters might work together. So you can do this based upon how you wish to have stronger and weaker students support each other or work together. You have this ability to do that. And nobody wants to wash the dishes, Danny. Unless they haven't any money to pay for their meal, then they might need to wash the dishes, so they won't be let out of the restaurant. So these are the roles that we have in our restaurant. They'll also need to have some physical space for the restaurant. And in a normal classroom, let's say you have 20 to 25 students, this would be the formation that you would have. You'll need a table for the students and a kitchen area. The waiters will take the orders and then take them to the cook. So the waiters will ask the students, what would you like? Now, you may have taught I would like, or can I have, or may I, but whichever language you have structured earlier, you would maybe put it on the board to help them, or maybe you've gone past that. Maybe they're able to do this in a freer way. What would you like? Can I have? Can I have sausages? And then the waiter goes to the cook and says, can I have sausages? And if the cook has already given their sausages away, they will say, I don't have sausages. Would you like burgers? And then the waiter will go back to the table and say, I don't have sausages. Would you like burgers? So there will be a good transfer of communication between the customers, the waiter, and the cook, and it will go backwards and forwards. So we have moving, and they can order whatever is on their menu, and the cook will have the word cards that were the items that you've built up. So then the cook will serve the food onto the plate. The food will be the flashcards put onto a paper plate. You might have some realia, some real food, but probably not. You might have access to some plastic play food, and if you do, that would be a good opportunity to use that. So now that the restaurant has been designed by the students, the food that it sells has come from the students. You've practiced those items and you've let them have it. I would think, yes, the cook plates the food, so the cook takes the request and puts the food items onto the plate, and the waiter brings it to the guest. So I think if you were to run these activities over several lessons leading up to a listening exercise like this, it might prove to be a little bit more motivating for the students. And I know that a listening exercise like this, it is testing, it is practicing a listening skill. But the reality is, I think many of us will need our students to be able to complete a task like this. So hopefully the restaurant game will have been motivating for the students. Hopefully it's something that you would maybe like to try. So that brings us quite near to the end of the session today.
What?
Oh, I'm not going to play the listening again, but I will draw together some conclusions. And I think the biggest one is that listening can be a lot of fun, and it really is multi-skill. So the activities that we've gone through, the students will have been writing their menu, they will be reading the menu in the restaurant, they will be talking to each other, asking questions and giving answers. So all 4 skills have been used. Everything has had a purpose, it's had a goal, and it has been graded correctly, built up quite gradually. It's also been input to the students. Students have given their own input into the vocabulary, and it should be very effortless. So I'm sure you've seen these resources. I just want to share this link, cambridgetogether.org. It may have been covered already earlier in the sessions, but from this link you can get lots of resources, like the Home Fun booklets for fun skills in the middle is available to download from our World of Better Learning blog. The website World of Fun is getting additional exercises, and the Word Fun World app is free to download at the moment on Apple and on Android. And this is just everything that we're doing to help with the current crisis that we're living through. Then I asked 2 questions at the beginning, where my accent was from, and we got there. And I also asked another question. Do you remember what the other question was? No. I asked about how many sounds the English language had. Yeah, number of phonemes, 26. Missing vowels. So I had some clues in the start. If you Google a number of phonemes, 44 is a number that you'll get a lot, yes. But 44 doesn't cover every version of English. So if you're from Ireland, like I am from, or if you're from Scotland, where the Loch Ness Monster is from, you will call Nessie the Loch Ness Monster. People from the south of England certainly would say the Loch Ness Monster. They don't have the ch sound, which is an extra sound speakers of Irish and Scottish English have. So it's 44/45. That's the answer to the number of phonemes in English. And it can be quite contentious. I've read a few papers recently where different arguments for different numbers, but traditionally it was seen as 44. And if you speak Irish English and you have the sound, then it's 45. I checked the pronunciation in the Cambridge Dictionary, and in our online dictionary, loch is pronounced loch in both British and American English, but in Irish English it's loch. Yes, please do fill in the feedback. I'm going to end. No, thank you for your time, and I hope it's been useful, and I hope it's helped fill the time during these periods where we're all stuck at home. Anyway, I'm going to unlock my front door and see if my children want to come in, and I'm just going to finish by saying thank you very much. Thank you very much for your time.